Patterson with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Policy, Stephanie Watkins Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a great week so far. We have a special call today, and I'm really excited. We have Leslie Alberton on the impact of talking a bit about the budget impact on legal funding. So we're actually going to go ahead and jump right into that. And then if we have a few minutes afterwards, we'll give some highlights about what's happening around the state. But today, the main topic of this interview, we're going to talk about just a part of the state budget that really and disappointingly um, uh, just does a number on civil legal services and takes away that funding. I want to tell you a little bit about Leslie. She is the Chief Operations Officer of Legal Aid of North Carolina. She's also leading the firm's legislative affairs. And before joining Legal Aid of North Carolina, Ms. Alberton served as a judicial clerk for Ohio's 3rd Appellate District and spent several years in private practice. She began her career as a staff attorney at Legal Aid of North Carolina and a supervising attorney in Greenville, at the Greenville office, where she represented domestic violence survivors and subsidized housing clients. She went on to found the firm's statewide disaster relief project, leading the firm's response to Hurricane Matthew, Hurricane Florence, and Tropical Storm Fred. She's also served as an officer in many professional organizations and as a director for several nonprofit boards. And she's also on our board here at the North Carolina Housing Coalition, which she still is serving on our board. She is a contributing author to the American Bar Association's book, Meeting the Legal Needs of Disaster Survivors, and a co-author of the article Disasters Do Discriminate: Black Land Tenure and Disaster Relief Programs, which was published in the ABA Journal on Affordable Housing. She received her law degree from Ohio Northern University, where she graduated with high distinction, and she was named a 2019 Leader in the Law by North Carolina's Lawyers Weekly and a 2024 recipient of the 50 Most Influential Women Award presented by North Carolina's Lawyers Weekly and the Charlotte Business Journal, as well as a 2025 and 2026 Legal Elite in Family Law and a 2026 recipient of the Greenblatt Outstanding Legal Services Attorney Award. Leslie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And so let's go ahead and jump right in. I would love to start off with sort of a context setting question. Could you tell folks, what is IOLTA and how is it funded?
Sure. IOLTA stands for Interest on Lawyers' Trust Accounts. When attorneys temporarily hold client funds, so for example, during a real estate closing or while a settlement of some kind is being finalized, those funds are placed in special trust accounts known as IOLTA accounts. The client's money in those situations remains completely protected, but the small amount of interest those accounts generate is pooled together and used to fund civil legal services across North Carolina. What's really important for people to know is that IOLTA is not funded by taxpayers. For more than 40 years in North Carolina, it has been used as a way for the legal profession to help ensure that people who can't afford an attorney still have access to justice in civil cases.
And so can you talk a little bit about that? That's extremely helpful, that context. So as we talk about it a bit more, can you tell us about the budget and these new requirements, kind of what is spelled out in the state budget for organizations receiving IOLTA funding? What is the state budget doing to IOLTA?
Sure. The most significant change is that the state budget redirects almost all of the future IOLTA revenue away from civil legal aid and into the state's indigent criminal defense system, known as IDS. For the limited funds that remain available for grants to civil legal aid organizations, and that's mostly funds that was accumulated over the last year during the period of time that the General Assembly chose to phrase the IOLTA program, organizations are ineligible to apply for those grants if they provide certain types of services. So certain immigration legal services, representation or advocacy related to gender affirming healthcare, or engage in policy or grassroots organizing. Though the practical result of those limitations is that nearly every organization that has historically received IOLTA funding, and those are the organizations that primarily deliver direct civil legal aid to the citizens and residents of North Carolina, including Legal Aid of North Carolina, are no longer eligible to apply for those grants.
So can you give us that? I mean, that's awful, and I know this is something that since last week, and you've been pushing beyond since last week, but for quite a while, especially over this session, to kind of preserve IOLTA. But can you tell us a bit about what does this mean for the people that you serve, and talk a little bit about any specific impacts as well to housing legal services offered?
Absolutely. So the people who are ultimately going to feel this change are not lawyers in North Carolina. They're North Carolina families. At Legal Aid of North Carolina, every day we help veterans obtain benefits they've earned. We help seniors avoid financial exploitation. We help survivors of domestic violence obtain protective orders. We protect families from unlawful evictions, disaster survivors recovering from hurricanes, and people with disabilities to maintain their essential benefits. Now, more than 2 million North Carolinians, so that's nearly a quarter of our population, are financially eligible for legal aid services. And 92% of people who are eligible are going to face a legal challenge at some point in their lives. And for many communities, particularly in rural North Carolina, we are the primary source of legal assistance across that broad range of legal issues. So when funding for civil legal aid is reduced, it's important to understand that those legal problems that people face every day are not going to disappear. What's going to happen is they're going to turn into housing crisis, a domestic violence crisis, a consumer debt crisis, and really a greater strain on our courts in North Carolina and our community partners as people go into court unrepresented and they're evicted and seek resources in order to help them fill in those gaps. Now, turning specifically to how this change affects our housing work, housing is one of the areas where legal representation can make an enormous difference for a family. So legal aid services touch housing issues in almost everything that we do, but in particular, again, we help tenants every day who are facing unlawful evictions. And we work on habitability issues for seniors who may be living in unsafe housing. We work with families trying to preserve their subsidized housing and disaster survivors whose homes have become uninhabitable. We also do foreclosure work and a lot of transactional work around housing, like deed clearing and estate planning for low-income families. So without that legal assistance, many people just don't know their rights or how to navigate the court system. So that doesn't just affect them. Again, it means unrepresented litigants in our courts, more families who will be entering homelessness, and more of a strain on our local communities as a result. And I want to talk particularly about our rural areas because that is primarily where this loss of IOLTA funding is going to impact all of the work we do at Legal Aid, but especially our housing work. Many of our larger communities have funding that they can contribute to their local legal aid offices in order to do housing work. So for instance, Greensboro, Durham, and Charlotte, those cities all give Legal Aid of North Carolina funding to do essential housing services. Housing challenges in rural communities are especially difficult because our local communities lack the resources to support their local offices. And as we all know, families in rural communities have fewer housing offices and fewer legal resources available in general.
And I think something that stands out to me with what you said, not only like the layer of implications that this means um for millions of North Carolinians, but then, the geographic concerns, rural versus urban context, but and this is just my own digression of now with a lot of the property tax legislation and proposals and this constitutional amendment being on the ballot at the end of the year. Local sources are also feeling the pressure, so it's really concerning. I only have two other questions for you before we wrap up, but I would love for you to share with folks what can people do? What can they do to ensure vulnerable North Carolinians continue to have access to civil legal services? Is there anything else you think is important for us to know?
Thank you. There are several ways that people can help. The first is turning to attorneys who may be listening. Please volunteer with one of your civil legal aid providers and take a pro bono case or two. Pro bono cases can be handled quickly, but they can provide life altering outcomes for low income families in North Carolina. So that's a way that attorneys can help. And then for everyone, attorneys included, individuals, businesses, foundations, and community organizations can support organizations that provide civil legal services with financial donations. We are going to have a big gap in funding to make up here. And so that type of financial support is very important. And then finally, and I think this is possibly the most important thing I can beseech people to do, is just to help others understand the benefits of civil legal services. And then it's really not about politics at all. It's about making sure that someone who's facing the loss of their home or their safety or their income, that they have somewhere to turn and someone to stand beside them in court where necessary. And then you asked if there was anything else that I would like people to know. And yes, I think it's really important for people to understand, because this money is being diverted to indigent criminal defense, which is inarguably very important, that there is a constitutional right to a lawyer in criminal cases. And because of that, the state has to fund those services. But there is generally no similar right to a lawyer in civil cases. And that's even when someone is facing something as life altering as an eviction, or trying to escape domestic violence, or recovering from a natural disaster, or access to essential healthcare benefits. So civil legal aid, and up until recently, the IOLTA program exists because justice should not depend on whether or not you can afford an attorney. These people who will be affected by the change to IOLTA funding are our neighbors here in North Carolina. They're working families and veterans and seniors, people with disabilities, and survivors of abuse. So for us, we truly believe that access to legal help often determines whether or not our neighbors here in North Carolina can remain safely housed and financially stable and be able to move forward with their lives when they inevitably face a legal challenge. That setback should not determine their long-term stability. And so I just want to offer, this has sounded a bit like a downer, I know. I want to offer one final point, particularly to the people who we represent, and a note of hope. And that's that Legal Aid of North Carolina is still here, and we're not going anywhere. We continue to serve every county in our state, and we encourage anybody who thinks they have a qualifying civil legal problem to continue to reach out to us for help. While this funding change is certainly going to make our work more difficult, it does not mean that we don't remain steadfast in our mission, or that our commitment to ensuring that all North Carolinians have meaningful access to justice.
Wow. Thank you so much, Leslie, for joining us today and for everything that you and the staff and the attorneys at Legal Aid of North Carolina do. We sincerely appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time, Stephanie.
All right, folks, we are at time. Just want to plug in a quick reminder before we hop off. Our policy agenda survey is open until July 12th. So make sure that you fill that out. And if you already have, you can share it with a few folks. We want to make sure that the policy agenda that we develop, that's informed in part by this survey, has as many responses as possible. We will be putting out another update this week. We'll talk a bit more about the budget and those key housing appropriations and other key appropriations, as well as some legislative updates for you all. So we know, just know that those things are coming. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time.